You know how there are those stories, the ones that make the hair on the back of your neck stand up? The ones whispered in hushed tones?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, imagine a creature so weird, maybe so potentially dangerous, that entire areas of a brutal desert are considered off limits.
Okay, wow.
We're taking a plunge today into the legend of the Mongolian Death Worm, or as some locals call it, the Olgoi Korkoi.
Olgoi Korkoi, right.
It sounds like something ripped straight from, I don't know, a sci-fi movie, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Mm.
And what's really interesting as we kind of dig into the material you've shared is that this isn't just some, campfire tale that popped up last week.
Right.
We're looking at written accounts stretching back, what, a century?
Mhm.
It's woven into the local folklore, and there has even been, documented attempts to find this elusive
Mm.
thing.
Exactly.
And
That's what gets me.
it really makes you wonder what sparked such a persistent legend?
Yeah. So for you joining us, our mission in this deep dive is to really try and get to the heart of this mystery. Based on what you've sent over, we're going to explore the different ways this worm has been described, trace its history and written records, look at the expeditions that have tried to track it down, and consider the various theories about whether it's real or just a really, really good story.
And how it pops up in pop culture, too.
Oh, yeah, we'll definitely touch on that. We've got a fascinating mix of perspectives here, from online discussions with people actually in Mongolia to articles detailing scientific investigations and local folklore.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Mhm.
What in the world is this Mongolian death worm supposed to be?
Well, the local name, Olgor Korkoi, like you said, it translates roughly to large intestine worm.
Nice.
Yeah, paints a rather unpleasant picture right off the bat. Now, when we look at how it's described, the details, well, they can vary a bit, but there are some core elements that keep coming up in the material.
Picture a thick worm, uh, typically somewhere between 2 and 5 feet long, though some accounts stretch that to a pretty impressive 6 feet.
6 feet. Wow. Okay. That's not small.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And an interesting point here is that the kind of inconsistency in these descriptions, that actually strengthens the argument for it being maybe mythical.
Yeah.
A real biological creature would probably have more consistent features, right?
That makes sense. Yeah. 6 feet long.
Yeah.
That's quite a worm. And what about the color? Are we talking like camouflage desert tones?
Not usually. The descriptions often lean towards vivid colors, like bright or dark red.
Huh.
Sometimes it's described as yellowish, or even this really striking image of a white-gray creature that turns red when it's disturbed.
Whoa.
There are even mentions of it being, brown and scaly in some accounts.
Hmm.
But the consistent theme is this thick, tube-like body, often described as headless and legless, a grotesque tube of destruction, as one account put it.
A grotesque tube of destruction.
Right. And interestingly, some descriptions don't mention any eyes or mouth, but then another one even details spike-like projections at both ends.
Okay, so definitely not your average earthworm then.
Not even close.
But it's the supposed deadly abilities that really push this from just, creepy crawly to legendary monster status. Really.
Precisely. The stories you shared, they depict it as capable of some truly terrifying stuff. The most commonly reported is its ability to spray a corrosive yellow saliva or venom.
Corrosive?
Yeah, and this isn't just nasty stuff. It's said to kill instantly on contact and can even corrode flesh. And get this, metal.
Metal. There is.
Imagine that. I mean, from a biological standpoint, producing a venom strong enough to melt metal that requires extremely complex chemistry, a huge amount of energy for a creature this size. It's just not something we see in, terrestrial reptiles.
Yikes. Okay, talk about a bad day in the Gobi if you run into that. And that's not the only trick this worm supposedly has up its non-existent sleeve.
Indeed. Some legends go even further. They describe the worm discharging a bolt of electricity.
What?
Yeah, strong enough to kill humans or even camels. It's like a natural taser, kind of, in the sand.
An electric worm.
Again, generating a lethal electric shock like an eel. That's a highly specialized adaptation. It involves unique organs, control systems, not typically found in snakes or lizards.
Right.
And if that wasn't enough, some tales whisper of it traveling underground, creating visible waves of sand on the surface as it moves.
So it's like a desert torpedo of doom. Where is this thing supposed to live? Not exactly downtown Ulaanbaatar, I take it.
You're right there. Its habitat is consistently described as the desolate, arid, sandy regions of the western or southern Gobi Desert. Very remote.
Makes sense.
It's said to be more active during the hottest parts of summer, often surfacing after rainfall and sometimes even near water sources. Which has a grim sort of logic to it, doesn't it? A deadly creature appearing when life-giving water is present.
Yeah, that is kind of creepy. Okay, so we have this pretty terrifying creature painted in our minds now, but where did these stories even start? This isn't some modern internet creepypasta, is it?
No, not at all. The first written mention that really brought it to wider attention dates back to the 1920s. It was the paleontologist Roy Chapman Andrews in his book On the Trail of Ancient Man.
Andrews, okay. The dinosaur guy.
That's the one. He recounts hearing secondhand tales from Mongolian officials who, remarkably, seemed to genuinely believe in its existence.
Wow.
One official in 1922 even gave a fairly detailed description, sausage-shaped, about 2 feet long, no head or legs, and so poisonous that just touching it meant instant death.
Jeez.
But, and this is important, Andrews himself remained quite skeptical about it all.
Well, yeah. I mean, secondhand accounts can be unreliable, right? How much weight should we really give those early mentions if nobody actually saw it themselves?
That's a really good point. Secondhand stories can definitely get,
Mm.
well, embellished over time. Did anyone actually claim to see this thing back then?
That's what I'm wondering.
Well, that's a crucial distinction. Later, in the 1920s and 1940s, Soviet scientists, A.D. Simikov and Ivan Yefremov, they also documented numerous tales in the material you've provided.
Okay.
They noted a general agreement on this sausage-like, mostly underground, and incredibly deadly creature. But interestingly, Yefremov, who actually wrote a short story inspired by the legend, he later noted that while he heard the stories many times during his fossil hunting trips in the Gobi, he never met anyone who claimed a first-hand sighting.
Ah, okay. So it's always a friend of a friend or something heard from grandparents.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Always a story removed by a generation or two, which makes you wonder about the real roots of this legend.
Exactly.
Mongolian oral traditions likely stretch back generations. And there's this fascinating detail from a Reddit thread you found where a user mentioned a Mongolian proverb, disaster is from underground.
Mm.
They theorized it could be connected to the death worm, hinting at some kind of hidden threat. Plus, the term korkoi itself is interesting.
Right. You said worm.
Yet, while it translates to worm, it's also believed to have historically been a kind of taboo name, used for animals considered dangerous, both physically and maybe even, like, spiritually, especially snakes.
A taboo name. Almost like it's something you shouldn't even say out loud. That definitely adds a layer of mystique and, well, fear, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And it seems this fear, or maybe reverence, might have had real consequences. There are reports that in the mid-20th century, the Mongolian communist regime supposedly discouraged research or even just talk about the worm.
Get out. Really? They banned talking about it.
That's the claim. And, that kind of official silence could certainly allow a legend like this to grow even stronger in the shadows, right? It only adds to the mystique.
Wow. Yeah, actively trying to suppress information about it. That sounds like the perfect recipe for a persistent myth. So what's the feeling in Mongolia today? Is this still just a legend, or do people genuinely believe?
Well, interestingly, even today, it's estimated that something like 80% of Mongolians who know about the worm reportedly believe in it.
80%. That's huge.
It is a significant majority.
Hmm.
And it's not always viewed as just a biological creature either. Some locals apparently consider it more of a supernatural, malevolent entity, like a demon of the desert rather than something you could dissect in a lab.
A demon of the desert. Okay, that really shifts the whole conversation, doesn't it? From cryptozoology to something more metaphysical.
Exactly.
So with all these stories and, deeply held beliefs, it's no wonder that people have actually gone out searching for this thing, right? Cue the intrepid explorers.
Absolutely. The lure of a mysterious, potentially dangerous creature is hard to resist for some folks. We've seen numerous expeditions over the years led by cryptozoologists and adventurers.
Cryptozoologists.
Yeah, people who study and search for animals whose existence hasn't been scientifically proven, like Bigfoot hunters, but for other stuff. Ivan Mackerel is a prominent name here. He led 3 separate expeditions, 1990, 1992, and 2004.
3 times. Dedicated.
And then you have Richard Freeman from the Center for 14 Zoology, who led one in 2005.
These weren't just like casual hikes in the sand, were they? What kind of methods did they actually use? Did they bring nets?
They got pretty inventive.
Yeah.
Mackerel, possibly inspired by the sandworms in Dune, actually built a thumper.
A thumper.
Yeah, a device designed to create rhythmic vibrations, hoping to lure a subterranean creature to the surface.
No way. Did it work?
Well, He also reportedly used small explosives.
Explosives!
Yeah. Other tactics included aerial surveys, a rather ambitious attempt to dam streams to potentially flush the worm out, and setting various traps. But despite all this effort and ingenuity, none of these expeditions found any concrete proof of the Olgoi Khorkhoi. Nothing.
Maybe coming up completely empty after all that effort. Explosives, even. You'd think something that big and supposedly dangerous would leave some kind of trace behind, wouldn't you? A scale, a tooth, something.
One would certainly assume so. And then, reality TV shows like Destination Truth jumped on the bandwagon.
Of course they did.
They conducted their own searches, which obviously amplified public interest. And a New Zealand reporter, David Ferrier, he even joined an expedition back in 2009.
Huh.
A recurring theme in many of these attempts was relying on eyewitness accounts from locals. Interestingly, Ferrier noted that reported sightings seemed to, peak in the 1950s for some reason.
A spike in the 50s. That does kind of lend itself to those theories about secret government activity, doesn't it? Maybe Cold War weirdness. Spooky stuff.
It's definitely fuel for speculation. But were there any attempts to approach this from a more, scientific standpoint? Less thumping, more analysis?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. There was one notable Soviet study in 1983. They took a different approach. Researchers showed locals pictures of various snakes found in the region
Okay.
until they identified one specifically as the Olgoi Khorkhoi.
Which one was it?
That snake, the Tartar sand boa.
The Tartar sand boa.
Yep. And apparently a Mongolian scientist working in Inner Mongolia had similar findings, showing pictures around.
Huh. The unassuming sand boa. Could that really be the origin of this terrifying legend? It feels a bit anticlimactic, maybe.
Well,
I mean, a sand boa? That seems like a pretty big leap from a venomous electric monster worm. Are there really enough similarities to convince people? Or maybe just to start the legend?
that's precisely where the skeptical explanations come in. Misidentification of known animals is maybe the leading theory.
Right.
The Tartar sand boa does share some superficial similarities with the descriptions. It's relatively thick-bodied for a snake, it burrows, it has a somewhat rounded head, gray-brown scales.
Okay, I can kind of see that.
Now, it's completely non-venomous, harmless really, but its appearance and behavior, especially if you just glimpse it quickly in a harsh environment like the Gobi,
Yeah.
maybe under stress, you
Yeah.
could see how it could potentially be exaggerated or misremembered over time.
So a case of mistaken identity, amplified through generations of storytelling.
It's a very strong possibility. The crucial insight, I think, is that a relatively mundane creature, through misinterpretation and maybe fear, could have sort of evolved into this terrifying legend we're exploring.
Okay. Are there other candidates besides the boa?
Yeah, the material mentions others, worm lizards, for instance.
Worm lizards.
They're limbless reptiles, they burrow underground, and they can resemble large worms. Again, totally harmless, non-venomous. Large burrowing skinks or even theoretically undiscovered species of legless lizards have also been proposed as possibilities.
So maybe not a super poisonous electricity-shooting behemoth after all, but just some local wildlife that got a seriously bad reputation over the centuries.
That aligns pretty well with the folklore perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Legends have this natural tendency to spread and change through travel and storytelling. It happens with countless other mythical creatures around the world. And the fact that the descriptions of the death worm are so varied, sometimes contradictory even, that actually lends support to its status as a myth rather than a consistently observed biological entity.
Right. If it were real, you'd expect people to describe it more consistently, wouldn't you? Like, everyone knows what a camel looks like.
Exactly. And then there's the rather significant issue of the missing evidence.
Yeah, the big one.
Precisely. Despite all those expeditions, and the fact that the Gobi Desert's dry climate is actually pretty good at preserving remains.
Right, like dinosaur fossils.
Exactly. No confirmed bodies, no skeletons, no bits of the Mongolian death worm have ever been discovered. That's a pretty substantial argument against his physical existence, a very big worm-shaped hole in the evidence, you might say.
Yeah, yeah. And what about those more fantastical claims? The venom that melts metal, the electric shocks?
Right, those more dramatic, almost superhero-like abilities.
Yeah.
Biologically speaking, those capabilities are, highly improbable for any terrestrial reptile we know of. Producing venom that corrosive, it would involve incredibly complex chemical processes, a massive energy investment for an animal that size. It's just not something we observe in known reptiles.
Right.
And similarly, generating a lethal electric discharge, like an electric eel, requires very specialized organs, specific control systems, not found in snakes or lizards.
So those more outlandish traits almost certainly exist only in the realm of legend, then.
It seems highly likely, yes.
But what about those other theories, the more out there alternative ones?
Ah, the more speculative side of things. Well, some propose the death worm could be, like, a surviving relic from prehistoric times, a kind of living fossil that somehow hung on in the isolated Gobi
A
environment.
living fossil.
Okay.
Others venture into more, shall we say, conspiratorial territory, suggesting a connection to secret military experiments,
Yeah.
maybe Soviet bioweapons or even extraterrestrial life, especially given the timing of some of those peak sighting reports during periods of, high political secrecy and Cold War tension in the region. Alien worms in the Gobi. Now that's a plot twist. It's incredible how these legends can take hold and just branch out into such imaginative possibilities.
It truly is. And speaking of branching out, the Mongolian death worm has definitely burrowed its way into popular culture, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, big time.
Beyond the Gobi, this creature has really captured the imagination globally. Why do you think that is? Why has it become such a popular figure in fiction?
Hmm, good question. Maybe it's that primal fear of the unknown, the monster lurking just beneath the surface, literally. Plus, the Gobi itself is so vast and mysterious, it feels like anything could be out there.
That makes a lot of sense. That fear of the unseen, coupled with the allure of this vast, unexplored wilderness.
Oh, absolutely. Even if it doesn't physically exist out there, it certainly thrives in our collective imagination. You see it everywhere in fiction.
Yeah, we see its influence in some pretty well-known stuff. Many suspect it was a direct inspiration for the colossal sandworms in Frank Herbert's Dune.
Oh, totally. Shai Hulud.
Right, with their subterranean life and terrifying presence. Then you have the graboids in the Tremors movie.
Yes. The graboids, those underground dwelling monsters, definitely have a death worm vibe. Bursting out of the ground. Pure nightmare fuel.
Absolutely. What other corners of pop culture has it wriggled into?
Well, it's even slithered into gaming, hasn't it? The purple worm in Dungeons and Dragons?
Yep. And the formidable Karthus sandworm in Dark Souls the Third. And there's a creature explicitly named the Death Worm in the game Ark: Survival Evolved.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, its in-game scientific name even cleverly nods to both the Mongolian legend and Dune.
Ah, nice touch.
And let's not forget the Sci-Fi Channel movie, very creatively titled Mongolian Death Worm.
A Cife original. It's a cultural touchstone then. Or at least wonderfully cheesy Sunday afternoon entertainment.
Indeed. It's fascinating how this relatively obscure legend from the depths of the Gobi has managed to capture the imaginations of creators across so many different types of media.
It really speaks to that fundamental human fascination with the unknown, doesn't it? With the possibility of something extraordinary lurking just beyond our understanding.
And perhaps the stark, mysterious nature of the Gobi Desert itself just lends a certain credibility, or at least an enduring quality, to a tale like this.
So, as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways for you, our listener?
Well, we've journeyed deep into the Gobi, metaphorically speaking. We've explored the vivid descriptions of the Olgoi Khorkhoi, the history behind the stories, those determined but ultimately fruitless searches, and the pretty compelling arguments both for and against its actual existence.
Right.
While the really dramatic claims, the venom, the electricity, those are likely firmly in the realm of folklore. The idea that the legend might have started from misidentifying real creatures, like the Tartar sand boa, that seems like a very plausible explanation.
Yeah, it fits.
Yet the enduring belief, even the fear among locals, really underscores the powerful role of cultural stories and the mysteries that these vast remote regions can still hold.
Absolutely. The Tartar sand boa might not be as thrilling as a 6-foot, venom-spitting, electrocuting monster worm,
Definitely not.
but it offers a grounded explanation that aligns with much of the available information, or maybe more accurately, the lack of definitive evidence for the monster.
Precisely. And it prompts an interesting thought, I think, about belief itself. Even when you have logical explanations, why do some legends hang on so strongly? Maybe it's because the truth isn't always just about verifiable facts, but about the stories we tell ourselves and how those stories shape how we see the world around us.
Yeah. So here's something to maybe chew on after this. Considering this whole mix of cultural beliefs, the likely misidentification of real animals, and our inherent human attraction to the unexplained, what other modern-day myths might have similar roots, lurking just beneath the surface of our collective understanding?
That's a great question.
Perhaps the real mystery isn't the Algoi Khorkhoi itself, but this persistent human need to believe in something extraordinary, something maybe a little scary, hiding out in the wild and desolate corners of our world. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.